Ladies and gents, almost new reaction. This is Otto von Bismarck, Iron and Blood. Extra History Part 3 by the channel Extra Credits. Bismarck was just starting to get the hang of diplomacy when the throne of Prussia passed to new Frederick Wilhelm, who promptly sent him away to Russia. But then Bismarck got tapped in to serve as the head of the government and began pushing for his great project, the unification of Germany. Yeah, okay. So I guess this is the video where I guess peak of Otto von Bismarck we'll see, I guess, where he shined. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. In the past video, I think we still saw that wild man Bismarck thing, but by the end of it, he made some wise remarks that I guess transformed into the the famous Otto von Bismarck there was. I guess this channel shows him bald with just hair in the sides. Like I guess it transformed just like that. All right, so it's gonna be fun. I wrote quite a few history videos already. If you want to see them, check out the cards as a playlist. I go to for it history. There are lots of different history videos. Check out the playlist too, like Old Sagacity Production, Internet Historian, CGP Grey, Tier Zoo, Oversimplified, and yeah, let's do this one.
As Bismarck moved from radical to pragmatic, he was at last offered a position in which he would shine. The position of envoy, diplomat, and deal-maker.
The boss.
Bismarck's tutelage in the diplomatic craft was swift. As he wrote to his wife, "I am making rapid progress in the art of using many words to say nothing at all." He wrote this from Frankfurt. He had been assigned as the Prussian envoy to the Diet of the German Confederation, that being the body that was supposed to figure out how the whole mess of 39 German states were to work together. But working with the Austrians was the furthest thing from Bismarck's mind. He was there to assert that Prussia was Austria's equal, and he did this with aplomb by lighting a cigar. See, smoking in the assembly was a privilege granted only to Austrians, but when the Austrian representative sitting next to him took out a cigar and began to smoke, Bismarck cracked out one of his own and, saying nothing, lit up. The press loved it. His enemies loved it too. When he returned to Berlin,
That's weird. I mean, only privilege for Austrians. So what, if anybody else does it, they get punished or something? Because how does that work? I mean, how is that going to be enforced? I mean, that's that, I guess, monarchy type of thinking, like only Austrians can do this and that, yeah.
One of them claimed publicly that the only thing Bismarck actually accomplished in Frankfurt was burning a cigar. And, of course, because old habits die hard, one thing led to another, and the ever-diplomatic Bismarck found himself once again on the field of honor, trading shots with a fellow Prussian over a cigar burnt to snub the Habsburgs. But his time in Frankfurt taught him one thing. If the Prussians were ever to carry the same weight amongst the German states as their much larger rival, they would need allies. So he began to court what he saw as the two most valuable possible confederates for Prussia, Russia and France. But then, in October of 1857, the King of Prussia suffered a stroke. The king's brother, named Wilhelm because, of course he was, why should a family have to come up with more than one name, took over the leadership. This Wilhelm, though, considered Bismarck as...
That is the case with lots of different kings and monarchies around the world, right? Their naming and everything is very tight. It usually goes with the numbers, first, second, third. It's usually the same name. Great-great-grandfather and the current king might have the same name, just with the numbers.
Nothing more than a petulant schoolboy. His words. Bismarck had a plan, though. Bismarck always has a plan.
There you go.
He would counter this opinion in a most un-Bismarckian, and therefore most Bismarckian, way. He delivered to the prince a 92-page treatise detailing exactly how Prussia could abide by the letter of the agreement they'd signed that founded the German Confederation, while simultaneously aligning the other German states against Austria. Unfortunately, Wilhelm thought that was stupid. Bismarck was promptly assigned as the Prussian envoy to the Tsar. Because, I guess if you want to get rid of somebody in 18th century Europe, you just put him in St. Petersburg. Or better yet, Moscow. And there he would sit on ice until 1860.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes with, any political or government position. If you want to get rid of somebody, just, put them in some kind of position that doesn't matter, far, far away from the mainland or something. But yeah, I guess Otto von Bismarck always saw to unify German state, while the king never cared for that. Obviously, he was king, like, I'm king, I'm living the life, why do I care? Why would I create any chaos like that? I think that's the mentality here.
62. These were some of the bleakest years of his life. He was cut out of state affairs, he fell ill, he nearly lost the use of his leg, and even withdrew himself from Russian society as his ability to serve as a diplomat was hindered by the fact that everybody knew he was there because his sovereign didn't want him in Prussia. But, at last, a strange...
Oh yeah, that is true, isn't it? I mean, when you send somebody like that, obviously everybody knows that, the king was trying to get rid of you. So how are you supposed to be a diplomat? Because to be a diplomat, you need to have some kind of a respect, some kind of a feel of power. But if everybody knows that you were just discarded like that, any negotiations you try to do, people are like, man, screw you, man, who are you? You're nothing. Even your king tried to get rid of you. So that doesn't work.
Letter came, one saying that he should return to Berlin with haste. When he got there, against all odds, he was asked to serve as the head of government. You might reasonably ask, why? Why would the king who had so long snubbed him ask him to run the state? How could he go from a remote diplomatic posting to the head of domestic affairs? Well, because nobody else wanted the job. At least, nobody else the king thought wouldn't plunge the country into civil war. You see, for a year, the Liberal Party had refused to grant funds for the army. And if you know anything about Prussia, you know Voltaire's old adage, where some states have an army, the Prussian army has a state. Meaning that not funding the army had brought them to the brink of constitutional crisis.
Whoa. Wait a minute, so Prussia was that much militarized? The majority of all civilians are kind of, already part of the military. Damn, that is the quote is something, isn't it? Some state has the army, but the Prussian army has a state. I mean, now I understand why in World War I, Germany was such a powerhouse. If that's the case, as soon as Germany came to be, all those people, militarized people, obviously when war's going to break out, they are going to be powerhouse in that.
And the king's closest advisor's best suggestion was to have the army overthrow the Democratic Assembly and then figure it out from there, which was basically 100% guaranteed to start a civil war. So the king figured, call in Bismarck, I guess. If he succeeds, fabulous. If he fails, then we'll just throw him under the anachronistic bus. As the announcement went out,
damn, so that means King realized that Bismarck's ideas might be a bit too out there, but he was not stupid. His idea was somewhat smart, but he just didn't want to touch all that, being king. So I guess he realized that Bismarck was smart, but in a way that could create chaos. That's why he threw him away in Russia, yes. But he realized that his idea is kind of strong. Even if he fails, I guess he's just going to use Bismarck as a scapegoat.
No one in the wider world of Europe really thought he had a chance. Neither did many in Prussia. For 2 weeks, Bismarck had to scramble to pull together a cabinet, because nobody thought his government would last. Simultaneously, he also had to bolster the spirit of the king, who, in his dejection, was continuously on the brink of giving in. And in the midst of all of this, almost as an offhand remark to those who were debating funding the army, he said the words that would define him and define the age. The great questions of the day will be decided not by speeches and majority votes, that was the great mistake of 1848 and 1849, but by iron and blood. But in the midst of all the chaos, Bismarck had a plan. Bismarck always has a plan. If he couldn't get to the Landtag to do what he wanted, well, then he would just have to do what he wanted anyway. You see, the king and the parliament were supposed to agree on any new budget before the government could collect taxes on that budget and do with them whatever they wanted. Everyone else took this to mean that the government could not collect taxes without parliament's approval. But Bismarck had other ideas. See, the Constitution didn't really spell out exactly what the government was supposed to do if the king and the parliament couldn't agree on a budget. So Bismarck just said, well, we don't have a new budget. Guess we have to keep collecting taxes based on last year's budget. And so sent out the king's tax collectors to do what they did best. For nearly half a
Damn, so he just found a loophole that if there's no new budget, I guess the old budget continues. They didn't put any deadline in that, you have to have a new budget or something like that. If you don't have a new budget, I'm going to use the old one. Damn, that is something. And at the time of chaos like this, where nobody wants to be part of his government because everybody thinks that it's going to fall apart, king is about to give up. he's basically bolstering everybody up. At the same time, just a few months ago or whatever, he was in Russia, almost getting his leg cut off because he's some kind of injury or whatever. So he was not in good place, yet he's still strong mentally and trying to pull everything together here. This just shows that his ambitions are really strong, because if a person has to be in this kind of a good morale and drive, they have to have some form of strong ambitions like he had here, and his ideas are really strong here, the way he's doing things. I don't know how else to say this, but yeah, I mean, and he's pulling things, loopholes and things. Damn.
Decade, the government would continue to collect the 1861 budget, and the king would have a stream of revenue without asking Parliament for a thing. With that settled, Otto now had the prestige and the freedom to turn to what he saw as his larger project, positioning Prussia to be the preeminent power in Germany when the German states finally unified. He moved rapidly. First, he checked in with France to see if they would stay neutral, or perhaps even join Prussia if an armed conflict broke out between them and Austria. Then he wooed the smaller German states to begin voting with Prussia, even as he was baffling the Austrians with an alternating volley of threats and lofty promises about how much they could accomplish together. But even as he was holding his own in German affairs, his zeal abroad nearly cost him his ministry. A rebellion had broken out in Poland, and the Russians were eager to quell it, already sending in troops. Bismarck immediately dispatched Prussian divisions to the Polish border and sent a note to Russia basically saying, "Hey guys, we can totally help you with that." Soon, protests over this action broke out from the other major European powers, with France, Great Britain.
Yeah, so I guess Germany and Poland, I guess that's a thing going on way before the World Wars. I guess he put Otto von Bismarck like, yeah, I'm gonna send troops to Poland. Yeah. So I guess Hitler was just following in his footsteps.
And Austria all condemning Berlin. Many thought that Bismarck would have to resign over this, but the king, the very same one who had exiled him to Russia before, refused his resignation. Soon, Europe...
I mean, of course he did. Everything was about to fall apart. Well, Bismarck came back with a loophole about the last year's taxes, and he saved everything. I mean, by now, King is thinking, like, this is the most important man in the whole world. I'm not giving him up.
Ire turned from Berlin to St. Petersburg, and while the matter would blow over in time, to the Russians, this unification of the European powers against them brought to mind the recent and disastrous Crimean War, and in doing so, reminded them just why having an ally in Prussia might be valuable. But just as this affair was being put behind him, his great project was again in jeopardy. The Emperor of Austria had invited the Prussian king to a congress of princes to discuss the matter of German unification. Bismarck at once saw that the Austrians had stacked the deck, and any vote at such a conference would go in their favor. But he also knew that he wouldn't be able to convince the king that an invitation from other princes was a trap. So he took a different approach. The king was never the most secure of people, so Bismarck convinced him that the invitation was an insult, and that it should have been sent to him with much more formality. So the king declined to go. But then, days...
Man, seriously, who is this guy, man? I don't know how to say it, but from the start of the first part up until here, Bismarck's idea is always, this, stupid and childish that you feel like, okay, I can't believe this worked. He wanted, king to reject that. He just said, oh, this is an insult. They should have sent, more, they should have sent the letter in more better way. I mean, who would think that would work? And apparently it did, because he knew that only one thing you can play to a king is his ego, I guess. Like, this is an insult to the king.
Later, the King of Saxony rode up, bearing another invitation imploring the prince to come. Now he had been formally asked to attend by 30 princes with a king as the message bearer. There would be no convincing good old Wilhelm that this was a slight. Instead, in a meeting...
Other side people like, oh, I get it what Bismarck is doing. You know what? I'm gonna send princes and with a king with a letter. How about that now?
Full of shouting, imploring, and not a little sobbing on both sides, Bismarck convinced the king that he would be giving up the independence of the Prussian army if he agreed to anything at this conference. And so, with Bismarck ripping off the door handle on the way out, once again, the king declined to attend. With that, the course...
I mean, imagine that, man. The king hated Bismarck, threw him in Russia. Circumstance happened in a way The Bismarck was needed. Bismarck, obviously with his hokey ideas that work. I mean, it's not a hokey ideas if it works like that. It's smart. I mean, that's the thin line, isn't it? If it works like that, it was smart idea. With his, volatile, smart idea like that, he literally pulled everything together. And obviously, King is gonna, hear him out on the massive issues. And if Bismarck is constantly saying, like, convincing him on things like that, you shouldn't go, and just pulling out things from left to right. First, it was an insult. Second time, it was like you giving up Prussian army or whatever. Of course, King is not stupid, but he realized that how smart Bismarck is. So if he's saying that, maybe there is something to this, so he's gonna decline.
Was set. The initial threats were in check. Now, at last, Bismarck could truly begin his project of iron and blood.
So wait a minute, so in World War I, Germany was bigger powerhouse than Austria. It's because of Bismarck? That's how important this guy is? I didn't know that, man. I've never heard of this guy before people told me to react to this. I mean, obviously in 1 or 2 series, I think, related to World War, I heard about Bismarck. But that's it. But damn, this is a really important guy. This is the guy who's going to shape Germany in a way. I mean, Austria was a powerhouse. I knew about the, Austrian Empire. For centuries, it was a powerhouse. But then in World War I, suddenly Germany was powerhouse. In World War II, Germany, kicked back and became even bigger powerhouse. I mean, I know why in World War I, the new founded Germany was such a powerhouse because, they were mostly militarized. Prussia was mostly militarized. But seriously, this is awesome. Alright people, if you like my next one, don't forget to like and subscribe, check out the week's did this link in the description, check out the castle, please check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.